Hi everyone, it's William with the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series. We're in 1915 today with a transitional stage of Dmitri's life. Thank you to the more than usual viewers who watched the previous video in 1935, and for the usual faithful viewers who did as well. I appreciate it. Really interesting stuff. I'm glad you watched it, and also to the new subscriber, thank you very much. Our recap for 1935. Yeah, it was kind of dramatic. Dmitri was giving a speech, an address to the Young Russia Party on its feast day, and he talks about the hostility to Young Russia, to the Young Russian Party amongst the emigre community, how it surprised him, how he is telling them, look, you're going to be attacked, not physically, but you're going to be harshly criticized, and how he talks about what he's heard among the emigres is particularly interesting. And this would have been a small group of people. So the extremists on the right, and he uses the words foaming lips, that they speak with foaming lips, and that he's even heard it said that the younger generation, those who were born after the revolution in Russia, should be exterminated. And that's the word he uses. So that's really extreme stuff. You know, he could have been exaggerating a little. Honestly, I hope he was. And then he refers to the head of the imperial house, which I thought was interesting because previously in the same speech he had called Kirill Gasudar, the sovereign, and we're going to see another change in how he addresses Kirill within the scope of this same speech. All right, so for 1915, in the last entry, it was just basically the last full day at Usovo before Dmitri left from Moscow, which is what we're talking about today. And you know, he and Maria were just, having fun, playing in the snow and enjoying each other's company, I guess. Our cast for today, we have Maria, Laming, Plesheyev, Barasova, Barasova's girlfriend, who's not identified. I don't mean a romantic girlfriend, just a friend of hers who was a woman, and Osovetsky, the occultist and opera singer Makarova. So very interesting cast. And we're starting out in Usovo. We're going to Moscow. Maria is not going with Dmitri. I guess Dmitri was so anxious that he left a day early before his sister wanted to. She would be coming the next day, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So here we go. It's the 3rd/16th February, Moscow, the Metropole Hotel. He has room number 2 this time. I think he had 2 last time, and the time before that he had 10. It's 2.5 degrees above freezing. Warm and sunny, he says, in the afternoon. So yeah, 2 degrees above freezing, that's warm for him. That's doing pretty good. That's doing pretty good. It's 35 here today, which is warm for me. I'm not suffering from the heat, as I feel sorry for people who are really heat sensitive and are really bothered by it. Okay, here we go. I got up in Usovo around 10 o'clock. I didn't sleep well at all. I woke up in the middle of the night. Yes, and my head felt terribly heavy in the morning. I had coffee with Maria and GM, and then we went outside. It really smelled like spring today. There were huge puddles everywhere. First, we bid our farewells to the hill in one final descent, then messed around in the snow. Around 12 o'clock, I went home, took a bath, and changed into a uniform. Lunch was at 1 o'clock. Around 2 o'clock, I went by train to Pavshino. Since the 3:34 train to Moscow was late, it ended up stopping at Podmoskovskaya station for an hour and a half, as a result of which I only got home at 6:15. When I arrived here, I called Plesheyev, but then went to see Barasova. She was again very sweet to me. She was terribly worked up. I sat at her place until 8 o'clock, then went with Plisheyev to Prague for dinner. Then I went back to Barasova's. Her girlfriend was there, and Osovietsky. We all ended up going to the girlfriend's place. Makarova sang gypsy ballads. It was pretty boring and dragged on till quite late. Oh dear. All right. Well, Plisheyev and Dmitri did not go to Prague, the city. They went to a famous Moscow restaurant called Prague. I should look it up and see if that restaurant is still there in some form. Okay. Yeah. And if any of you are native Russian speakers or better Russian speakers than me, I would ask you to weigh in on what is the difference between Zug and poyezd, because both words mean train, and Dmitri uses them both. I didn't realize there was a train that one could take from Usovo to go to Pavshino. I thought the nearest train station was in Pavshino, and I don't know why Dmitri uses two different words. So the first train he calls Zug, which is actually the German word for train, and I didn't know it existed in Russian, but I guess it does. And for the train that took him to Moscow, he uses the word poyezd. So as a person who's very interested in language, I would love to know, if those are interchangeable, or if he's actually giving us a clue to how they were different. Okay, Plisheyev, you may remember the first person. As soon as he gets to Moscow, Dmitri calls Plisheyev. Well, Plisheyev was my age, roundabout. He was in his late 50s. He was a theater critic. And you wouldn't think those things would make him a person that Dmitri would want to hang out with, although Dmitri did, this speaks for the fact that he wasn't interested in theater just because of actresses. He liked hanging out with this theater critic. On the other hand, it may have been because of the actresses, because last time Dmitri and Plisheyev were together in Moscow was the time that they went out on the prowl and picked up these two women at the restaurant at Metropole and had a late night assignation with them. So maybe this is the reason the old boy wanted to leave Usovo a day in advance of his sister, because he wanted to have another night on the town with Plisheyev. But then he seems to have had a change of mind about that, and he tells us that he decided to go to Barasova's. So apparently he had already made a dinner engagement with Plisheyev, and they still had their dinner at Prague at 8 o'clock. But he went to Barasova's both before and after the dinner date with Plisheyev, and so there was no evening out on the town. Barasova at this point is clearly the woman he's pursuing. He tells us a little bit. He says that she that she was speaking very sweetly. Okay. She was very sweet to him. How does he put it? She was very sweet to me. Okay. What does that mean in Dmitri language? Yeah, she's a little bit encouraging, I think. And also, he says she's worked up. And I never know quite what to do with that particular Russian word. If it means, you can translate it different ways. You could say she was excited. You could say she was agitated. I decided to use this anachronistic phrase for 1915 of worked up. She's worked up, because it's kind of halfway in between excited and agitated. The one is usually positive. You're excited about something. The other is usually negative. She's agitated. She's anxious. She's pacing the floor. There's some kind of emotional response. She's worked up about him coming, apparently, and she speaks to him very sweetly. Okay. Maybe she's having some qualms about how this is developing. I don't know, but he's definitely not discouraged about it. He goes back to her house. That's his choice, instead of going out for the evening with Plisheyev looking for random girls. Or in Dmitri's case, I should definitely say women. He wasn't looking for girls. So who's there with Brasova? Usovo-Moscow, the occultist, the guy who's involved in, I think, seances and that sort of thing. And Dmitri found him quite fascinating the first time he met him at Brasovas. I wonder what the connection was between... Actually, I think he and his family had some kind of connection to Grand Duke Michael, but he seems to be, a fixture with Brasova. And Dmitri was quite fascinated by him the first time. This time he's not so excited. I think he would rather have the girlfriend and Usovo-Moscow out of the way. But there they are. So, he has to make the best of it. And then when they go to the girlfriend's house, and I dearly wish he would tell us what her name was. I don't know why he is not. Why would he not? Is she really that uninteresting that he can't even remember her name or just doesn't bother to mention it? And there's this, Natasha and Alexandra, my Russian colleagues, it's a guess. Dmitri calls this woman Makarova and says she sings these gypsy ballads. Okay. So Alexandra and Natasha are guessing that this was the opera singer Vera Vasilyevna Makarova-Shevchenko. I looked her up, but I didn't pay close enough attention. I don't know if I'm right in saying she was an opera singer. She was on stage. She was a singer on stage. And she comes over and sings these gypsy ballads. I don't know if she was hired or if she was invited or what. And Dmitri usually liked this sort of thing. I mean, he and Felix Yusupov, Dmitri had such fond memories that he talks about of getting together with Felix Yusupov. And Dmitri was a very avid and I think good guitar player, balalaika player. And they would sing themselves gypsy songs. And this was kind of a Romanov tradition. I knew two Romanovs in London back in the day. They're both deceased now, who had beautiful voices and played the guitar and sang this kind of gypsy music. One was David Chavchavadze, whose grandfather was Grand Duke George, and the other was Emanuel Golitsyn, who was a descendant of Paul I through the Duke of Mecklenburg. And they both, they both sang very beautifully in this sort of tradition of the deep, well, at least in David's case, the deep, rich baritone voice. Okay, anyway, why does Dmitri find it boring? Well, I mean, I would take a stab in the dark and say that it was because he didn't want them there. He didn't want Usovo-Moscow. He didn't want to talk about occult things. He didn't want to listen to music, even if it was good. He wanted to be with Brasova. Okay, so this will develop. Next time, what do we have? Well, when we return to 1915, we are going to have Maria arriving in Moscow. And we are going to have both of them taking a night train to Petrograd, which was the wartime name for St. Petersburg. And so we're not, if I recall correctly, we're not going back to Moscow in 1915. So this is the end of Moscow, and that definitely makes me think that he wanted to go to Moscow for one last fling before leaving for St. Petersburg, and leaving, and before Maria arrived to slow him down. So it's a very interesting diary entry, the next one. It's the anniversary, the 10th anniversary of a very significant date in Dmitri, Maria, and Ella's life, an event that happened on the 5th of February 1905. I'm being a little coy about it, but most of you probably know what it is, and if not, and you don't want to look it up, well, you'll find out soon enough. And the other very interesting thing that's happening is the first appearance in these diaries, 1915 diaries, of the Yusupovs, husband and wife, Felix Jr. and his wife, Dmitri's cousin, Irina Alexandrovna. So they're turning up, and they will be more of a fixture in the diaries in Petrograd. Okay, and when the next video will be in 1935, And we are going to have Dmitri describe that a 3-day trip that he took with Alexander Kazanbek to visit the great Russian hope and messiah in Sandryak, meaning Kirill, and to spend the feast day of Saint Vladimir there. So he'll be talking about that, and he'll be talking about a certain person who he didn't get along with very well in relation to, and I'm not talking about Vladimir, who was also in Sandryak. So I'm leaving you hanging a little bit on that one, but only until tomorrow. Yeah, I'm sure you don't have a hard time figuring it out anyway. Yeah. So, anything else? No, not really. I will just say that yesterday in the 1935 video, you may have thought I'd gone off my rocker talking about the sense that young Russia might have been like teetering on the edge of being a cult, and not only that, but sort of in the kind of the death cult where sacrifice and the shedding of blood is emphasized. And that isn't something that you're going to pick up in Dmitri's speeches. That wasn't the kind of guy Dmitri was. So where I'm getting this from is from the writings of Kazanbek and some of the other young Russia members who were, they're making me kind of nervous with the things they're saying. It's pretty, they're kind of sliding towards something not so great. But we'll talk about that later. I did not mean to go 17 minutes with this one. So I hope to see you next time. Bye.